some ER work.
Okay, one more question about this subject.
No, see, to me, it's volume dependent. If you have a very large hospital, a lot of deliveries, if you're doing a section and there's 2 precepts while you're doing the section and they're all drop-ins, it's the same as if you were doing a hysterectomy. So if your volume is large enough, you need an OB service and then you need a GYN service.
Yeah.
Just a comment.
Go ahead.
We have a large volume of both OB and GYN, and we have people in-house 24 hours, 7 days a week, and there is that delineation.
Sure.
I'm covering ED and consults, and you're covering labor and delivery, and we both back each other up depending on the needs. So.
Sure. All right, so I want to get to the last topic here about collection of research and data on OB hospitalist data.
So just to summarize, I don't know how much progress we made. We kind of agreed that it's kind of a hard thing to define. Research will come from asking questions in individual institutions or individual research institutions to do it. But in terms of coming up with data and really helping to try to define core measures, I think would be a huge advantage. And if we could even come up with a few core measures that we could agree or circulate or promulgate that hospitalist programs should collect, that we should look for, it would be a really useful thing to just have a few simple points. As we described, Chris described that they were looking at all these huge volume of data, all these points, but it really came down to, when he looks at that data, it really came down to the life-threatening events or the saves, the things to do. And it seems to me that at a minimum there are a few core measures that we could begin to develop and do it, and whether we need a committee to help develop this, and maybe circulate out a packet to people to say, here's a couple of core measures. Ultimately, it'd be nice to say, take these core measures, compare them to facilities that don't have hospitalist programs and say, can you begin to see a difference? But first things first, what do we do better? So one of the things that we talked about is unattended deliveries. I'd be willing to bet that institutions with OB hospitalists have fewer unattended deliveries, nurse delivered with no doc, than institutions that don't. That seems to me low-hanging fruit that we could look to quantify and at a minimum have. So I think a couple of simple core measures and simple buttons would be a good thing to do. I'm not sure that we have a consensus of what those are at this point, but I think it would be a worthy thing to shoot for.
Just to drive the point home, before OB hospitalists came into our institution, the year before we came in, there were 63 nurse deliveries that year. The year we came in, there was 1. I mean, it's very low hanging fruit.
Very low.
You could do crash to cry, from when they call the crash C-section to when the baby cries, and you could look at that in terms of how long it takes.
And we talked about the 30-minute decision to incision. The problem is when you look at institutions, and so looking at like HCA facilities, when you ask anyone their data about 30 minutes decision, how many fall out? Oh, hardly 0.002%, because it's how you define when you've called that section. Well, they didn't call it till the doctor was here saying, no, it has to go now. So it gets to be a very fuzzy number to really be able to have any faith in that.
Go ahead.
The most specific criteria, it's like dead or not dead.
Well, that's a good one.
The time of admission door to the time of delivery interval is significantly different when you have someone on the spot.
Yeah, and
Prolapse cord administrators understand.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just a concern that I didn't see a sign-in sheet or anything, and I'm worried that after a few minutes and everyone goes.
There was a sign-in.
And we'll put it back on the outside, because obviously we haven't really solved any problems today. We've raised problems, we've put some light on some problems, but we haven't solved them. So that's one of the things. There we go. Yeah. So go ahead.
We generally a lot of questions are good, but if we could just get everybody's emails and pass this around and say, here's a list, add to the list. If you want to add some other key criteria, add to it. Let's all just, then at the end of the day, we'll have something in writing that we can all pass around, and all the other little topics that we want to talk about, we can put it together.
So if I have your email, I will, facilitate getting this out to you. But then I need you to get it back to me, and I need people to step up and say, not only am I interested, but I will work on this problem, or I'll give you time and work on this. I will, volunteer to do this or that.
Right.
That's what I need back. Go
I don't
ahead.
want us to forget jobs. If anybody is looking to hire OB hospitalists, let's make sure we go through the website and we post positions because their doc's interested. I get phone calls. A lot of people out there looking you know,
Yeah.
from other states. People are asking us how we did it. So
Sure.
there's a huge interest. We're at the very beginning.
We're pioneers.
Yeah.
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, we just decide on whether or not we're gonna do an annual meeting, and it might be good to do a biannual meeting for this 2 years to kind of get everything.
Well, what I would like to do is a mass email and a vote saying, what do people want, you know? And are there, you know, if there's 100 people that want to have a meeting in 6 months, that's plenty. That's enough to make that happen. If, you know, 90% of people say, no, actually, I'd rather just do it next year at ACOG in Washington, D.C., well, that's fine. We can decide to do that and then maybe go to ACOG and say, can you give us a day on a Saturday or Sunday before the meeting? Or can we have a half a day and have a formal meeting and then maybe do some simulation training with Tom Benedetti?
I'm concerned about the credentialing issue. I think like this gentleman said, that's very critical.
Very critical. We have to work on that now. We can't wait till next year and then decide about that.
I think in the meantime, you know, trying to get face to face and meet together is, logistically, that's tough.
Yeah.
But
we
I
gotta
think
do
meeting virtually
Yes.
through whatever website and things, I think doing that as a group contemporaneously, and we can do that almost continuously.
Yeah. Real.
I almost think we need that, but in 6 months we should say we need
Yes.
to do this again. We need the work groups like we just had. What we just did in these corners
Very
is
valuable.
really, really helpful. So when we
Yeah.
say we have this annual meeting has a bunch of little meetings.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
need work groups who get together for at least over a 2-day period
Sure.
and take each one of the problems that we were talking about,
Yes.
break it down, and we spend an hour at least in that group. And then at the end of those 2 days, we all get together and all those work groups start talking about what they felt and have their secretary
Yep. Yep.
do that.
Good.
And I would ask that everyone get the word out to their colleagues. We all work with other OB hospitalists, and just, you know, it'll go out on your website, but for those of us whose colleagues are not on, you know, hooked up to the website, to get the word out so that we do get other folks involved. And I think, you know, eventually we're gonna have to put our money where our mouth is too. We're gonna, if we want to have a legitimate society, it is gonna take some funding, and I don't think any of us want to, as nice as it was to have these big groups here, I think that, you know, we need to look to ourselves for the funding, not to these, you know, large organizations that are
Okay,
out
last
there.
thing, Frank?
The model of maternal fetal medicine might be useful. I was at the second Society of Perinatal Obstetricians meeting about 33 years ago, and it was 40 OBGYNs who happened to have an interest in high-risk obstetrics.
Yeah.
And they spent 2 days trading stories. I mean, there were presentations and you know, some studies, but it was really just 2 days of docs with a special interest. Over the years, that eventually they defined themselves and became a subspecialty.
Yeah.
But it started with, you know, really 50 people getting together for 2 days to share stories.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everybody coming tonight. It's 6 o'clock now, so I'm going to make this formal part over with. As soon as people have finished questions and stuff, let's meet over in the View at the Marriott up on the 39th